Good morning once again, everyone. Even though a few of us may still be joining, let me suggest we get going, if that's okay. And then hopefully we will be complete very shortly. My name is Jamie Boex, as some of you may know. I'm the Executive Director of the Local Public Sector Alliance, and I am glad to be joined by so many of you, some of which for whom it's evening, some places in the world it's afternoon or morning, and in California it is very, very early in the morning. So I'm very happy that we even have Jennifer Joel from the Hewlett Foundation with us today. On behalf of the Local Public Sector Alliance, I am very pleased to welcome you to the first working group meeting of the LPSA's Working Group on Gender Equity and Women's Empowerment. If you'll tolerate a few minutes about the background of the working group, I hope to hand over to Jacqueline Matura very soon, but I think it's useful to start with a few minutes background perhaps on why an organization such as LPSA would even have a working group on women's empowerment and gender equity. And I'm trying to manage my technology so I can do screen sharing. There we go. Good. As many of you know, and I hope you can see my screen, thumbs up, can you see my screen? Yes. Let's see if I can now manage my screen. There we go. There we go. Very good. As many of you know, the Local Public Sector Alliance is a global alliance of champions for efficient and inclusive decentralization. It was established as a platform for knowledge development, for knowledge sharing, and outreach and convening by practitioners and scholars working on decentralization and localization around the world, with a common objective of achieving a more inclusive and responsive, efficient public sector. As an alliance of advocates for inclusive and efficient decentralization and localization, LPSA aims to elevate the debate on decentralization and localization by informing, connecting, and expanding the global community of practice, and by shifting the focus of the community of practice from the global level to the country level. In addition, the Alliance wants to reach across to what we like to refer to as adjacent practice communities, where we believe our knowledge about decentralization and localization might offer practical insights. The Gender Equity and Women's Empowerment Working Group is a product of that effort. As Jacqueline will explain in greater detail in a moment, the specific objective of the working group is to elevate the global debate on the important role played by decentralization and localization in achieving gender equity and women's empowerment. But before handing off, I want to take a few minutes to link the topic of decentralization and women's empowerment. And as a starting point for that conversation, I'd like to use the definition of decentralization coined by Professor Roy Ball, who defined decentralization as the empowerment of people through the empowerment of local government. And this basic understanding really was explored in the World Development Report of 2004, that realized that central governments aren't necessarily very good at empowering their citizens. Central governments rely on a very long route of administration and accountability to deliver localized services, where citizens generally have little or no voice or control over politicians at the central government level. And central government officials may also find it difficult to effectively manage, particularly in an inclusive manner, frontline services top down. By contrast, decentralization and multi-level governance bring the public sector closer to the people and shorten that route of accountability and inclusion, and therefore have a better chance of including everyone in local decision making. As a famous US Supreme Court justice once said, women deserve to be in all places where decisions are made. It is not necessarily the case, though, that decentralization and devolution always improve inclusive governance or development outcomes. The extent to which a decentralized public sector achieves inclusive governance and sustainable development is likely dependent on two things. First of all, the nature of local governance institutions or local government bodies. In order to be able to respond to the needs of constituents, local governments should be corporate bodies or institutional units, as the IMF calls them, with a degree of political, administrative, and fiscal autonomy and authority. And second, in order to achieve greater efficiency and inclusion, multi-level governance systems need to have political, administrative, sectoral, and fiscal systems that can ensure that stakeholders at all levels of society are able to work together to solve their collective challenges, including gender equity and women's empowerment. In the work that LPSA has been doing over the past few years, it appears that the absence of effective multi-level governance is an important factor and an important obstacle, really, to inclusive, equitable, and sustainable development, including in the area of gender equity and women's empowerment. Now, because these two communities of practice tend to live in their own silos or in their own stovepipes, policy advocates may not even realize that the lack of progress on women's empowerment may actually be caused in part due to weak intergovernmental systems. While many of the colleagues who joined us today may understand the importance of local governments in a decentralized setting, this is not necessarily widely understood either within the global decentralization and localization community, nor necessarily within the global women's advocacy movement. And that is what this working group is hoping to change over time. Let me end by giving you an example that will hopefully make clear the link between decentralization and gender equity and women's empowerment that serves as a backdrop why LPSA wants to serve as a platform for an ongoing dialogue at the intersection of these two topics. And that example highlights the importance of childcare. As many of you know, although gender roles are slowly evolving over time, data suggests that the burden of unpaid work still falls very disproportionately on women. And this is especially true when it comes to the responsibility for childcare. Without a safe or healthy place for young children to go, mothers are often less able to pursue their education or less able to earn money to help support their families compared to fathers. Access to safe, free, or reduced childcare would thus allow these women to either pursue employment or educational opportunities and achieve greater equity and higher earnings, while also leading to greater labor participation and faster economic growth. Yet, while central government agencies have access to the financial resources and expertise, they often have a hard time introducing childcare schemes because they're too far removed from the people to deliver frontline services in an efficient and equitable manner. Yet, in turn, local governments in these countries may have the advantage of being close to the community. They often lack the policy framework or the financial resources to pursue childcare. To us, perhaps the solution is obvious, but what we need is an effective intergovernmental solution whereby stakeholders across different government levels cooperate. For instance, with technical and financial support from the central government, local governments could provide oversight to make sure that local childcare facilities provide a safe and healthy environment for children, and local governments could provide childcare vouchers for eligible mothers, allowing mothers to select a registered childcare provider in their community and freeing her to pursue her education and employment opportunities. However, these successful intergovernmental solutions don't necessarily come about spontaneously. As a result, in countries with weak intergovernmental systems, local governments are less effective at promoting gender equity, and may not be able to ensure safe and healthy childcare options within their communities. This means that ineffective multi-level governance can act as an obstacle to women's empowerment. At the same time, effective local governance, multi-level governance can act as an opportunity for women's empowerment. Since local governments are the level closest to the people, a relatively small investment at the local level can have a potentially large impact in terms of women's empowerment and social transformation. But I have a feeling I am preaching to the converted here. And in fact, Jacqueline will be able to carry this conversation much further in a moment. So let me stop with my very brief introductory presentation and share that I'm very pleased that Jacqueline Matura has agreed to take on the challenge of co-chairing and coordinating this working group. There we go. We are still looking to identify additional core members and co-chairs for the working group, as we would like each of our working groups to be inclusive and to reflect the diverse global community of practice. Jacqueline has 15 years of regional and international experience at the front line of strengthening institutions, particularly in the areas of WASH, rural development, gender equity and women's empowerment, and local governance. Her work and passion revolve around strengthening development institutions and providing technical assistance for inclusive and sustainable development in Africa, particularly women's networks and organizations. She has been an associate expert with VNG International for the last 9 years. She's also the director at DevCom Global Associates, a consultancy firm based in East Africa, and also consults for other institutions such as GIZ and the Hague Academy for Local Governance. Jacqueline holds a master's in sustainable development from the University of Sussex, as well as a bachelor's in water and environmental engineering. She also holds a number of certificates in water policy and multi-level water governance. She's a registered graduate engineer with the Engineering Board of Kenya. So much smarter than me, clearly. She now joins and serves as the LPSA's co-chair and coordinator of the Gender Equity and Women's Empowerment Working Group, and is a member of UCLG's Africa CIB Gender Working Group, as well as the International Water Association. She has served on VNG International's advisory board for a number of years in Sub-Saharan Africa and MENA region. She's an NGO representative at the board of Women in Water and Sanitation in Kenya, where she chaired the Capacity Building and Research Subcommittee. With that introduction, let me pass the floor to Jacqueline Matura. Thank you so much, Jacqueline.
Thank you so much, Jamie. I trust that everybody can hear me. Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, depending on where you're joining us from. Thank you so much for joining us for our inaugural LPSA Women's Empowerment and Gender Equality Working Group meeting. We are really honored to have you here, and I have to say it is really an absolute pleasure to be the co-chair and the working group coordinator. And I really do hope that we will get volunteers from this meeting to take up this conversation and elevate the discussion on women's empowerment and decentralization and how multi-level governance can be an opportunity for this. So I will be giving an overview on the ambitions of the working group, but also calling upon you to share your feedback, your ideas. What do you think should be a priority for us in the next 1 year? Even as we preach inclusive decision-making and decentralization, we really want to set an example and put you as members of the LPSA in the driving seat. So please give us your feedback as we go along during this meeting and even after this meeting on what you think we should prioritize in the next 1 year. When we look at our areas of interest, I want to say that LPSA embraces a very holistic approach to women's empowerment and, and gender equality in local governance. And as Jamie presented, we look at the local government body in its entirety as a system, not just looking at the political level, but also looking at, or just looking at women as beneficiaries of local government services, but also looking at them and looking at how can we move from just service provision by local government to gender transformative initiatives by local government that challenge the power relations, that challenge the norms and create social change. So because we believe that for local governments to achieve resilient, inclusive, sustainable, efficient development and governance, women must contribute, they must benefit, they must participate, but they also must influence at the local political level, within local government administration, and within the service delivery. So these are the 5 areas that we will be looking at. We want to look at in the next 1 year. And starting with the first one on the women's voice and political empowerment. Women's empowerment, political empowerment at the local level, there has been an increased attention to women's participation in local politics, especially with the introduction of the SDG indicator 5.51b, the one that focuses on women representation in local deliberative bodies. But however, when you look at the latest report by the UN Women, you find that there are there's quite a discrepancy, or there's quite a variation in terms of the women's representation in local deliberative positions in local politics and in local councils. So you find that there's quite a lot to share across countries. There's quite a bit to share across regions, because we want to ask ourselves, what are local governments and stakeholders doing to strengthen women's engagement in politics? What are people doing in Asia that is working and not working in Africa? What are people doing in other stakeholders doing in other areas that we find that there's progress in women's representation in local politics, but in other areas we are still behind. So even as we go on, I would like for us to think about what kind of questions or knowledge gaps are missing within this area of women's voice and political empowerment at the local level. What gaps do you see in practice? What gaps do you see in knowledge? So you can participate in a survey that we are doing by going to www.menti.com using that code that is on your screen, 14673721. You will also find the link in the chat. I think Marna has posted the link in the chat. You can follow that link to menti.com and tell us, what do you think we should focus on when we look at women's voice and political empowerment and women's participation in local deliberative? But what are the issues? Where are the gaps? Because through our global community of practice at LPSA, we hope that practitioners from across regions, across sectors, across institutions will find a platform for knowledge sharing to address these gaps in knowledge and practice, and that we hope this can start today. So especially from the conversations that we will be having from Mr. Anil, will be sharing on this specific topic and his experiences in Nepal. Yeah, so we are really looking forward to that. So please let us know, what questions are we asking the right questions as we go? Are we looking at the right issues? Are these the issues that are important to you? So as we move on our second area of focus, which is the women in local government, our focus here is on the local government staff involved in the day-to-day running of government business. And research has shown that the more diverse your team, the better the performance. It is better for positive returns. It is for your bottom line. It is better for increased financial viability, improved performance, better service delivery, better outcomes in general. And this is usually in the case in the corporate world, but this is no exception for the local governments. And research has shown that the lack of gender diversity and women representation in senior level positions of local administration could be very well the barrier to government organizations reaching the peak performance. So having more women in municipalities and in public administration improves fiscal allocations, planning and service delivery for all, and it promotes better governance and inclusive development. But this is one area I noticed, in my opinion, that there's not a lot of focus on. we are talking about women in politics, we're talking about gender responsive governance, gender responsive financing, we're talking about gender responsive services, but we're not actually looking at what are the labor participation gaps within local governments, and I think there's a missing in my opinion, there's a big gap in data, in information, in research on this issue. Are local governments setting an example, to address labor participation gaps? What career progression, how is career progression like for women who are working with local governments? How do weak intergovernmental systems that Jamie mentioned affect women employment or women's experience as employees of the local governments? And how does decentralization, for instance, of power and autonomy to local governments address the challenges of gender work balance within the workplace gender balance within local governments? So these are some of the questions that we have for the topic on women in local administration. So please feel free. Again, you can go to menti.com and use that code that is on your screen and give us ideas. What are the other issues? What are the knowledge gaps that we should be focusing on when we talk about women in local government administration? Are there other issues we should be looking at? So you can use a link that is available in the chat box for you to share your ideas. And then looking at gender responsive finance and service delivery. This is a very popular topic for practitioners in local governance. And there's a common understanding that in the absence of more equitable and gender responsive finance and basic services, local governments are unlikely to support the inclusion, empowerment, and productivity of women. However, is there evidence of this? Do this gender responsive budgeting, for instance, and gender responsive services actually lead to the promised gender outcomes and economic outcomes? In addition to this, beyond meeting the practical needs of women, do local government services and initiatives actually challenge the structural barriers that undermine women's empowerment? And on one end, we have just provision of basic services. At the other extreme of the spectrum, we have gender transformative initiatives. So what are local governments doing? Are we only focused on meeting the needs, the practical needs of women, but are we moving towards gender transformation? Are we within the society? So please let us know if we are asking the right questions. Is this what you want to talk about? Is there something else? Are there other challenges as local governments try to implement gender responsive finance and service delivery, so that then we know how do we structure the conversation moving forward? So this meeting for today is, we really need to get your feedback so that then to inform the discussions and the conversations that we have in the subsequent meetings. For instance, we are really looking at the second meeting focusing on this issue of gender responsive finance and gender responsive service delivery. Do we have examples of where local government initiatives and have actually led to, social transformations, have actually led to women's empowerment? So if you have case studies of local government initiatives that are leading towards women empowerment, please share with us so that then we can include them in the next discussion in February. Which we hope you will be joining us. On the last one that I want to talk about, because Jamie talked about the fifth one, is gender in the context of crises, especially reflecting on the COVID pandemic, and of course the issues that are happening currently in the Middle East. Of course, many countries have elaborate national disaster preparedness plans, but the pandemic actually showed us that the local governments do need to have strong emergency management systems, so that then they can identify vulnerable pockets and respond to these pockets, these challenges quickly. And of course, how the LG responds to crises and the pandemic and emergencies will, of course, have an impact, will impact differently on women and on men. And sometimes, especially when we looked at the COVID pandemic, it actually makes women even more vulnerable. So we found that were local governments ready? Are local governments prepared to deal with gender issues in crisis? And then what are the constraints undermine gender responsive measures being implemented by local government? For instance, the issue of intergovernmental systems comes in. Well, we know that we know that during a crisis, you find that there's challenges of overlapping mandates, overlapping responsibilities because of the national level and the local level. We have issues of disruptions of services, and a lot of times these are gendered services, or what I like to call gendered services, like social protection, GBV prevention, and protection measures, and health, and so on. So the issue is, what are these issues, and how can local governments be better empowered, be better equipped, be better prepared to be able to respond properly to gender issues that emerge during a crisis? So really, we are really looking at unpacking these issues in the next 1 year, in the next several meetings, and we really hope that we are on track. If we are not on track, please let us know what are the things that you want us to focus on. What are the challenges that you're seeing when we talk about gender and women's empowerment, gender equity and women's empowerment, that the conversation should be about? What should the conversation be about when we look at these 4 and 5 issues? So again, you feel free to go to menti.com and vote and give your feedback on that. You can also give your feedback in the chat. We will be having a discussion after this. Just allow me 1 minute. We will be having a discussion after this on what are some of the key priority areas that you would want us to focus on in the next working group meetings. Moving on to the part I think we have all been waiting for. This is the panel discussion that we will be having today. A lot of research and dialogue has been done on women's empowerment and gender equity over the last few decades. Yet at the pace we are going at, it will take hundreds of years for us to achieve gender equality. So we were asking ourselves, what is it that is needed to unlock the momentum for us to move from where we are to where we want to be? How do we move from ambition to action in gender equity and women's empowerment? So we have a distinguished panel with us today. Please feel free as they speak to post your questions on WhatsApp, on the chat box, and also in the Q&A section. Please feel free to share and note down your questions. We will have a Q&A session after this. Our first speaker is the distinguished Dr. Jennifer Obado Joel. She is joining us from California, which is really, really early. So we want to recognize your sacrifice for you to be with us here today. Dr. Jennifer Obado Joel is a program fellow in the Gender Equity and Governance Program at the William and Flora Hewlett Foundation. She focuses on the monitoring and evaluation of strategies and grants, and assisting identifying potential grantees and performing due diligence. She also facilitates cross-program learning and engages with peer funders and participates in developing and managing grant portfolios in women and economic empowerment, inclusive governance, and feminist ecological justice. She holds a bachelor's degree in sociology from the University of Ibadan, Nigeria, and has a master's degree in public policy from Central European University in Budapest. She also has a PhD in security studies at University of Central Florida, Orlando. So we are very excited to hear from Dr. Jennifer Obado Joel, a perspective from the Hewlett Foundation. You're welcome, Jennifer.
Thank you very much, Jacqueline. And good morning, good afternoon, good evening to everyone joining from everywhere else in the world. At the Hewlett Foundation, particularly for the Women Economic Empowerment Strategy team, our focus is really to support gender-responsive macroeconomic policies in East and West Africa. Like Jacqueline had mentioned, there have been a lot of work at the micro level, and I'm referring to work around supporting women's labor force participation, work around supporting improved gender data for policy and development action. But over the past 5 years from our previous strategy, what we have discovered is that there is a missing link between a lot of the work that has been done in practice or in scholarship and the effect on policies, especially when we are looking at policies around social protection and tax justice, or the way the informal economy and the informal market is being engaged by policymakers. So over the next couple of years, I believe from 2022 to 2026, our goal is to promote the adoption, funding, and implementation of gender-responsive macroeconomic policies in East and West Africa in a way that support all women's opportunities, well-being, and agency. And our second goal is actually to shift power. And by that, we mean we seek to actively address and combat patriarchal, racist, colonial, and neoliberal power structures and imbalances that we regard as root causes of discriminatory macro-level economic policies across our different lines of grant making. Like I was saying to an economist friend last night, we are really addressing the gender neutrality of a lot of economic models and economic thinking that is shaping decision making by policies, whether at the local level, in terms of nationally, across Africa, and even in terms of the way international financial institutions, multilateral organizations, and bilateral agencies are engaging with the policy and development action in East and West Africa. Then our third goal is to strengthen we advocates across East and West Africa. So we know that there are a lot of people on the ground that are doing good work, that are closer to the issue and also have lived experiences of the challenges and are also part of the solutions of to the issues of women economic empowerment. So our goal is to identify such feminist movements, such development practice network groups such as LPSA, and to support them, because we believe that it is this sort of action at the local level, at network levels, across movements that could activate the formal policy responses we are seeing that places gender and women at the center of macroeconomic thinking and action in East and West Africa. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much. Right to the point. Really nice. I really loved what you said about shifting power and patriarchal norms, racial norms, and challenging these social structures that have been undermining ideas of equity and the concepts of equity. Thank you so much for that brief and to the point presentation. I would want to move on to Mr. Anil Chandrika. Mr. Anil Chandrika has extensive professional experience in capacity development over the past 25 years, focusing on institution building, good governance, community development, women's economic empowerment, and the program management. He has specialized in program design and management of interdisciplinary projects with a strong emphasis on rights-based inclusive development model. He has a unique mix of expertise in strengthening community-based organizations to address poverty through improved natural resource management. He has in-depth knowledge and experience in participatory development planning and management, and has worked with organizations such as the World Bank, IFAD, Aga Khan Foundation, UN Women, UNDP, UNICEF, and UNHCR. He has lived in and worked in South Asia, particularly in the marginalized uplands regions of Hindu Kush Himalayan countries. And he has extensive experience developing he has extensive development planning experience and has worked with national level reform programs with multi-donor and multi-agency partnerships. So Mr. Chandrika, thank you so much for joining us today. And he will be sharing about his experiences from Nepal, focusing on our first focus area, which is the women's participation in local politics. Welcome. Mr. Chandrika.
My screen.
Yes, you can go ahead.
All right. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Jim, for the opportunity. I don't think that I've chosen a better stage than as we are today, because as you know, the UN community over the years have been practicing 15 days of activism against violence against women and girls. So this is very appropriate in this particular 16 days. We take up activities which are very relevant to both in terms of stopping violence as well as empowering women and girls and addressing the whole issue. So as I was mentioning, I took up an assignment with UNDP Nepal, where the state was moving from a unitary system into a federal architecture. The constitution was a very progressive one, whereby let me quickly take you to the presentation. So what I'm going to do here is to give you an overview of certain research problems that I have myself researched into, what the major findings and discussions and the conclusion. So basically, look at it. We looked at primarily, if you look at Nepal, apart from women being marginalized, the whole community is very much stratified into caste dynamics. The caste are the social construct, where marginalized group are further marginalized. So Dalit is one such group which has been completely marginalized over centuries. And among the Dalit, women in Dalit group are further marginalized. So it's more like a double marginalization, within the context. So about 1.8 million Dalit women, accounting about 13% of the total female population. That is the population distribution of this particular group. And if you look at Dalit women, they are basically in terms of the literacy rate, they're about 34%, and access to education is only higher education is about 11%, compared to 54% of the total female population of Nepal. And they are the victims of several violences. About approximately 50% of the Dalit women faces violence, with only about 4.4% of incidents being reported to the police. So, so in terms of, access and marginalization, and in terms of, access to any kind of resources, they are further kind of neglected population. So, the people's movement in 2007 led a slight improvement in the status of women, both politically and socially. The first Constituent Assembly had 197 women, of which 25 were Dalit. So, all of the Constituent Assembly was constituted to basically write the new constitution, which took about 8 years for them to, come up with the constitution, for all kinds of political reasons. So at the local level, 7,700 Dalits were elected in various positions, after the new constitution was constituted. This Dalit representation has increased from 22% of the total population, exceeding the population size of 13.3. So this is the only group because of the progressive or positive discriminatory policies of the government in terms of putting within the constitution. You had substantial number of representation, although their overall population density compared to the population has been much lower. But in terms of the progressive, policy that the government, came up with the constitution, had a greater representation. So 88% of the Dalit representatives are women. Most of the elected Dalit, into the in the local governments, and also within the larger, provincial and the federal parliament, of which if you basically see 88% of the representation of this marginalized community has been women. So this study, what is focusing on how formal and informal. So the reason why this formal and informal education. So as part of my role in terms of strengthening local government, I have toured the country and visited a number of municipalities and rural municipalities and urban municipalities. And my interaction with the mayor and the local administration, each time when I ask the council, where is your Dalit representative? They would say that, oh, they are uneducated, they have now been to school, so they can't, they are only elected because we made a positive policy, So they are simply there, So each of the political parties were compelled to have a Dalit women candidate. So for the sake of having this candidate, they put them. And of course, all of them have got elected. But when it came to, their rights in terms of representation, that were completely denied or ignored because of this very, very brushing statement saying that, oh, they're not educated and they cannot contribute very much. So that was the reason, I got inquisitive in understanding whether is that the real, case, can they really do represent their constituency or not? So in terms of the affirmative legal provision, the electoral representation appeared to be effective in redistribution of goods and disadvantaged groups. So of course, in terms of positive discrimination, there is, a lot of advantage of having, positive or affirmative actions. It brings together a group of relatively inexperienced, less educated politicians who are expected to play a substantive role in representing the citizen. So that is the whole argument. Although they might be given the provision through a positive discriminatory provision within the Constitution, but in the end, they are supposed to represent their constituency. And their constituency is not only the marginalized group or the women, but the whole entire constituency in which they are supposed to represent. The quality and the quantity of public goods do not seem to be affected. Overall, corruption is less where more women are in parliament and government bureaucracy. So these are some of the positive things why we need to have more women in political decision making and in public, public offices. Education plays a considerable role in women's empowerment as it enables them to address problems, face customary and traditional practices, and contribute to the challenges in their lives. Now, women can benefit from education as it will enable them to address all forms of discrimination. Although education is viewed as a critical milestone empowerment of women because it enables them to confront discriminatory practices and customary traditions that are extremely patriarchal, and women have yet to be liberated from the ingrained of Hindu patriarchal systems. Now, this is in terms of very much in the context of Nepal. So, where the religion plays a very important role. And that's why the marginalized Dalit communities are further marginalized because of the Hindu patriarchal system, which has been, time immemorial practiced over centuries. So the purpose of the study was to explore how education contributes to Dalit women's leadership ability to effectively serve their constituency, to make public decisions favorable for the Dalits and other marginalized community. So this was, the purpose of the study. There were two research questions, where I basically looked into how Dalit women had been experiencing their role of being elected as local representative in Nepal, and how did the education contribute to their leadership ability in elected Dalit women at local government to represent the marginalized citizens. So these were the two, questions that were, researched. So several studies and have demonstrated that men and women differ in their political and policy preferences. But this is, in terms of the literature, because voters are typically unable to compel their legislators to commit fully to policy, implementing policy frequency, reflect the policymakers' preferences. Women political understanding is general, and marginalized women in particular may create policy-making biases against female policy interests. So I will skip the significance of this presentation will be shared. So I'm sure. So let me come to the major findings. What were the major findings of this whole exercise? So in the two municipalities, I basically looked at 16 elected women Dalit representatives cutting across 3 municipalities in different part of the country. One in the plains of Nepal, in the mid hills, and in the hills. So in each of these municipalities, the increased expectation from family, community of the marginalized women, support from family, community, and political parties. I mean, these were the kind of evident in among the most of these elected representatives. We are elected, but often not counted or heard in decision making. So, as I said, progressive policies have got them to a position, but whether they are able to exercise their dutiful rights, it is questionable. Gradually being noticed by citizens and some stakeholders. So they most of them felt that yes, some of the stakeholders do recognize that now I'm an elected member, I represent the council, but but other than that, there were not much of a traction, as such. Essence of education for gaining public trust and for practical reasons. So many of them felt that if we are educated, somehow the constituent members and the general public have a inherent trust, for all those practical reasons. If there is somebody who is not educated or not gone to school, or somebody who is gone to a college, he is consulting with them. So there is some amount of benefit that they say. Divan's idea of education has a process of living through a continuous reconstruction of experience, fit with the experience of most of the elected Dalit women leaders. So most of the elected Dalit women leaders, their education is their real life. They have gained tremendous amount of experiences over, their years of, confronting with the, confronting with the issues and challenges, the daily grinds of life, the daily grinds of life. So from that itself is also, considered as a living, education role. It is very evident that the role of formal education has very little to play in terms of the selection and subsequent election of these women candidate as Dalit women leaders, as vast majority of them did not attend any or very little schooling. So of the 16 case studies that I've done, vast majority of them did not go to school, or they never had formal education, but they still were able to represent their community, in terms of, they won the election, they represent their constituency. It also showed that formal education has little or no influence on their ability to discharge their duties as elected representatives. So this was very evident. We might perform our roles better if we were educated.
We're running out of time.
Sorry?
Maybe we can summarize because of
yes,
time.
Yes, I'm coming.
Yeah.
So so in a nutshell, what was very interesting in learning was, although these people, these elected Dalit women leaders were elected to their position, but the institution in which the municipality itself, where they were placed, became very discriminatory in nature, whereby many of them would not invite them for the council meetings, because they basically say that they have very little to contribute. They cannot actually contribute very much because they've never been educated. And most of the minutes are sent to their house just for the signature purposes. The constituency in which they represent, the community members, some of them would come to them, directly for taking up the issues. But many a time what they have seen over the years is that because their role is not recognized very much within the elected council, many of them would, go directly to some other influential leaders within the council. So these kind of challenges is what primarily. So bottom line is that in terms of, we might have progressive, policies, but at the end of the day, if the whole of society approach is not, geared towards making these changes, no matter how much of our, positive policies we might have, they might not transform into empowering these elected women or elected representative in discharging their duties. So that is primarily the bottom line. I'll end it there, and I'm sure that Jacqueline will, circulate this presentation. And also there is a publication which I've already shared. So those who are interested, they can also go through that. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Anil. You know, representation is not participation. And if we are going to actually get any headway, we have to address all domains of change, issues of resources, issues of structures, issues of well-being, issues of critical consciousness within the society that we are working with. Thank you so much for that wonderful presentation. I hope I can see people are already typing in their questions. Please note down your questions. We will have an opportunity to ask our experts after this. Our next speaker is someone I have had the privilege of meeting, and I'm very excited to introduce her. Madam Jacqueline Mustashabel is currently the Director of Gender and Youth at UCLG Africa. She has also served as the co-president at the UCLG. She has a long career in public service as a principal secretary, chief presidential protocol affairs. She has worked as a mayor. She has been a chief executive officer at the National Arts Council, the Ministry of Planning and Foreign Affairs. Her CV is quite long. She has done quite a lot in Africa and at the international level. Sorry, just 1 minute. Yes, you can see she has been the vice president of the East Africa region and executive member also at the UCLG. She has been an executive member at AIMF and AVCOI. I will not try to pronounce that in French. And she has also been an attaché at the Seychelles High Commission. So she brings on she has been a public servant. She has worked in local government for a very long time. She has been at the forefront of spearheading the African Local Gender Charter, and she will be giving us her experience with that. Over to you, Jacqueline.
Thank you so much. Thank you very much, Jacqueline. I love the picture that takes me to another life. Welcome everybody. Good afternoon, good morning, and it's a great pleasure to screen meet you for those I haven't yet met, and I look forward very much to meeting all of you. So we'll go straight off because I do not want to go over my 10 minutes. So a charter. I'm going to talk about the charter and looking at it from an angle as in from aspiration, ambition to action. When we say charter, automatically we think of something as in rules, as in the law. And so for us, it's why a charter. And I would just like to bring to your attention that the first formal documents that we've had, that we recorded in history, started in 1689. That was the English Bill of Rights. And then in 1789, which probably all of you are familiar with, is the French Declaration of the Rights of Man and the Citizen. And then the Universal Declaration of Human Rights in 1948. However, despite of what we've, the first three that most of us has been taught at school, we have what was started by Africa. Yes, the continent of Africa, you're hearing me right. It was in 1236, and it's called the Charter of the Kurukan Fuga, or to make it simpler, they refer to it as the Mandem Charter. And this was removed from the UN in November 2022. I'm not really sure why, but that's how it was. So now, why this? Because the world we regulate, we function according to laws, policies, rules and regulations. So we've decided that for us to look at the equality of gender, maybe it was about time to have a charter as well. So we, together with our friends, our partners from Europe, we had a platformer and we had UCLG And then we had CEMR, that's the Council of European Municipalities, and we started working on this. And through the process, we got the politicians involved, the civil societies and stakeholders. How did we do that? It was online meetings that we had with them, whereby exchanges were shared, and because we're dealing with a whole continent with different backgrounds, different groups. So we then came with what you can see as next to you. I mean, on screen, sorry. And this is the charter. And this was launched in May last year during our Afro-City Summit in 2018. And it was a process of about 3 years work. So what's in the content? This is a charter with 23 pages, and it has the introduction, and the declaration of intent, the preamble, and then the 4 chapters. Now, basically, what will be motivating the continent, what the focus will be for the continent, would be based on the 4 chapters, really. It's the concepts and principles and values. It's the priority areas for action. It's the accompanying provisions. And then the 4th chapter is the final provisions. As we go along, we'll sort of have a look into what it is about, and of course, giving the 10 minutes slot that we have, we'll try briefly to bring the charter to you. But then again, we can share it with you online, and you can all have a read. And we hope that you'll be able to disseminate this information to the majority of the people as you wish, to the whole world. So we use for us to be from ambition, and now we are getting into the action of it, the implementation of it. And this we do through we have a user guide, because the charter may be a bit complex, which I don't think it is. So we've introduced a user guide, and through the user guide, there are examples, there are different notes that you can focus on. And then we also have posters and flyers, and which we can, we all know what we do with posters, we all know what we do with flyers, so we distribute them in public places. And we also have the help of the video. And it's a very short one. It's about 3 minutes, and whereby there's the talking. It's at the moment we have it in the English language, and as you know, on the continent we practice 4 languages for UCLG Africa. It's English, French, Arabic, and Portuguese. So eventually these will be translated in all 4 languages. At the moment it's in French and English. And so the question now is, who is implementing the charter? We are well placed. We are lucky. The organization that we have comprises of elected mayors or councillors. We have a network that we call the Network for Elected Women, and they do this. But apart from them, it's all those who are elected, even if you're not in the network, but you are an elected official of Africa. This is where we focus. You are a mayor. This is where we focus. There was a question that came up with thinking that implied the working with men. And in fact, we do. Many a time, we sort of have the tendency, the perception that gender is something women. We should not look at it this way. We should look at it as gender is both men and women. We may be stressing more on the requirements for women, and that's because probably there's been the bit of lacking behind. Mr. Anil from Nepal just mentioned some of the setbacks that he's experiencing at the moment, but look at him. He's a male champion who's pushing forward the case of the Dalit women. So in every time there should be the men, and my advice would be bring in the men, as many as possible, because it's through them that the women, they would hold the hand to get the women there. And let us not think of it as a fight. It is not a fight. It's a promotion for women, because the minute you say fight, it surrounds negativity. So we should look at it as the promotion of women issues in areas where it is yet to be addressed. We have decided on some priority areas for the implementation. There is the political aspect, the economic aspect, and the security aspect. So these are the priorities from the Charter, and the 3 points, the 3 aspects that we focus on. And these areas are being implemented at the moment. They are the personal equality and women's economic empowerment. And then we have the leadership and the local governance. We also have partnership and cooperation for gender equality, communication and awareness raising for gender equality, and the protection of women, girls, and children against violence. Now, how are we doing this? First of all, for the Women's Economic Program, and also we have a campaign. I'll come to the put of the campaign later on. And then this is a campaign whereby we try and get the woman into economic empowerment, into employment. Now, there's a very high percentage in some countries, even up to about 75% of women in Africa who are the ones in the forefront of economic development. However, it is sad to note that most of them are not registered. They are into informal economic, and now our target is to try and get them to to register and complete the formalities for them to be into the economic empowerment. And there's a couple of programs that we have, the concept of the programs that we have in mind, and we are yet to be able to get it in. And the reason being, we'll talk about it later, there's another slide for it. It's mostly the financing. And for leadership and local governance, we offer through UCLG Africa, we encourage and we offer training in leadership management, how to manage when you are a politician, for example, how to manage the media. We all know that the media will create you or will kill you. So whichever way, and it's good to use the media, but it's like fire. It has to be a good servant, but once it overtakes you, then it might destroy you. So these are important in getting your points across. And partnership and cooperation, I've just mentioned finance, and through the partners that we have, it helps to be able to push our agenda forward. And we have a protection of women and girls against violence. We have launched a campaign for that, and we're pushing all the time, and we say no all the time to violence against men and women, no matter at what cost. It should not happen, and it cannot happen, and we all need to work together to get it on. I know, Jacqueline, I'm run out of my 10 minutes. Just give me one other minute. And these are the tools that we're using for us to be able to work with, and they are the flyers that we share, that we bring to all the mayors, and to create awareness. So they are the what do we call them? They accompany us on this voyage. And the key actions, as I've mentioned, is to develop women's leadership and local governance. This is the action 1. And this is it. We do the training courses targeting women. And you see, we put men as well. Men is always with us, because they're the ones to be able to lead us, to guide us, to accompany us, to make it happen. Because if they're fighting us, then it's another kind of battle. We don't want them to fight us. We want them to be our partners. And then we focus on the inclusive leadership in politics, administration, and business. We're talking about the gender sensitive budgets and other kinds of programs. And then we strengthen the advocacy on professional equality and the economic empowerment of women. We mentioned that as well. And our action 3 is the protection of girls against violence. All these we're doing, and mayors are very, very active. Some of them, you know, they even have results that shows from their action. And then the technical and financial results, this is where we need support for, because everything, you know, for things to take place, there is a cost. There is a cost for human resources because we need to train them. And many of them would like to do things, but it costs, and then they need the money. So now, there again, with the theme of from aspiration, from ambition to action, we need to, for further, we need to consolidate and propagate actions around gender equality, and then exchange good practice and provide technical support. So this is what we need to develop with partners. And when we develop the cooperation with the partners, we promote gender equality in Africa, and so the whole continent benefit. And we want an Africa that will look like this, and eventually the world. I'm focusing on Africa, but my wish is for the whole world. So we have equality, we have equity, and we have inclusion. So that's it. Thank you very much. And sorry, I've taken about 3 minutes overlap.
No worries.
And,
Thank you so much,
questions, I'll
Jacqueline.
be happy to answer.
All right. Thank you so much, Jacqueline. It's really nice to hear that mayors are taking action, because it's always a challenge translating policy into action. So it's really nice to hear that there is progress and movement in that direction. Thank you so much for that wonderful presentation. For last but definitely not the least is our esteemed speaker, Julia Monroe. Julia Monroe serves as the Gender Equality and Feminist Municipalism Policy Officer in the World Secretariat of UNCLG, as well as supporting the Local for Action Hubs program team. Hailing from South Africa, she has a background working with nonprofits and local governments in South Africa and Europe on issues of gender equality and urban sustainability. Thank you so much, Julia, for accepting to share with us what UCLG is doing with regards to gender equality and women's empowerment. Over to you.
Thanks so much, Jacqueline. And I also first wanted to just say thanks to Anil for a really interesting sharing about Dalit women's representation. I found it really fascinating. And I also wanted to say to Jacqueline Moustache-Bell that I actually, oh, you can't see it, you can't see it. I have the charter and UCLG Africa Rafaela's flyers on my desk with me here. So they do reach around the world. I can attest to that. So yeah, I'm Julia Monroe. I work with United Cities and Local Governments, which is the biggest global network of local and regional governments around the world, and as well as local government associations. So we're the organized constituency of local governments. So we will go together as a collective voice to speak to global agendas, speak to the UN, to come as a collective voice. And of course, part of that is UCLG Africa is one of our regional sections with colleagues in the room today. So UCLG, just stepping back before I dive into more gender-related work, because it's all connected. UCLG last year adopted a vision called the Pact for the Future, which is like our visionary document. And part of that, or the overarching chapeau of our Pact for the Future, is around the notion of care and how do we care for people, planet, and government. And this notion of care as local governments is definitely driven in part as a legacy of the feminist municipal movement, which is what I'm going to touch on in a minute. So just more broadly, and it's already been touched on today, women in political leadership have been correlated with positive increases in terms of policies around equality, care, education, health, participation. but still, obviously, there's a big discrepancy. So in terms of women parliamentarians, we have about 26% in the world, and local government seats sat in by women is about 35%. So yeah, and then one of the things that was really recognized, though, is during COVID, often countries and cities that were led by women fared better, or their citizens fared better. So from this, we saw this emergence of a lot of women leaders' voices in local governments, pushing in terms of protecting care workers and ensuring that citizens were receiving the care services that they needed in order to continue their daily life. So whether it was like women mayors being more empathetic to what their citizens were going through and encouraging behavior shifts, or ensuring that citizens had access to livelihoods when their work fell apart, or grants, especially to women in industries that were frozen by COVID. Yeah, we really saw this strong movement of women leaders stepping up, and as a result of this recognition, being more bold in labeling themselves as a caring movement and a feminist municipal movement. Of course, not all women are feminists, and not all feminists are women. And I think, and that's why I wanted to acknowledge the work that Anil was doing, because I think that that's also a strong point, that quotas aren't going to be enough to we need a more transformative approach, as Jacqueline was saying earlier. So then coming back to the work of UCLG World Secretariat, because obviously, so this is the work I mentioned of women mayors and local leaders around the world, and we as a sort of umbrella organization promote, support, advocate for the work of these different leaders around the world. UCLG more broadly covers many topics, but specifically I'm focusing on the work we're doing with gender equality. And so the main guiding body in UCLG that is promoting gender equality is called the Standing Committee on Gender Equality. It's been around since 2011, and it's made up of members of each of our regional sections leadership. So in, for instance, UCLG Africa, because they're with us today, their local and regional governments women's constituency, known as Rafela, the president of Rafela is one of the elected members of UCLG Standing Committee, as well as the UCLG Africa president, Fatimatu Abdul Malik. And yeah, so each of the regional sections has a seat in the global standing committee. And then as a standing committee, it guides the work that's being done throughout the UCLG membership. The Standing Committee has a mandate to promote active participation of women in all their diversity in governance and decision-making structures, to promote and mainstream gender equality, to amplify the work of this feminist municipal movement, and to build the links between global agendas and what local leaders are doing on the ground. So within the Secretariat, where I'm based, we have a structure of policy and advocacy work, learning, and research. So for instance, the research that is done deepens and informs the policy and advocacy work, and all of the sections interact in this way. So for instance, in terms of policy and advocacy, every year we organize the Local and Regional Governments Day at the Commission on the Status of Women as one of the important advocacy moments to mobilize our global constituency with a collective voice to the UN in terms of issues regarding gender equality, and then ensuring that women in leadership have their voice heard in different international forums like the HLPF, the COP, the SDG Summit, and so on. Of course, I'm happy to talk about this more. We're talking then about supporting women in local leadership, as well as promoting feminist municipalism and gender equality in a much more transformative way. So I think sometimes we can conflate them, but they're very overlapping, but sometimes have like a feminist agenda is much broader. Obviously, it incorporates this broad idea of care, accessibility, inclusion as well. Yeah, and then in terms of learning, we have, for instance, we had a training this year on caring cities. We have an upcoming training on violence against women. And then in terms of research, we, for instance, last year, and we can share this, developed a SDG 5 localization report to the HLPF, and reports like this serve to showcase the work that local and regional governments are doing in terms of all the different indicators of SDG 5, and have a lot of nice examples there also about the value of women in local government, but also more broadly, the importance of gender transformative approaches. I think I'm going to stop there just to have a very quick overview and be more happy to answer questions rather. Thanks so much.
Thank you so much, Julia. Really nice presentation. I really love the connecting policy, research, and learning. I think also something that is coming back from Jennifer's presentation, that there's a need to connect this. And we hope that the LPSA platform also, with this working group, will also connect the academia, the think tanks, the donors, the practitioners, really, and really give an opportunity to learn lessons. So I want to open the floor to the members. This is an opportunity for you to ask your question. You can raise your hand. You can unmute yourself. This is an opportunity for you to raise. I think I had seen Felix had a question earlier. Felix, do you want to ask your question?
Sure. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yes. Thanks a lot. Just 1 second here. Okay. Hi. I'm Felix. I was before. So yeah, my question was around, and it's been partially addressed by Jacqueline and by Julia, is from my experience in working in, particularly in fragile conflict affected countries, is of course first step is to enhance capacity, work on constitutions, regulations, norms, and whatnot. But as long as you don't have men on board, particularly male decision makers, it will only take you so far. So, I mean, it's a very broad question. So we're seeking to identify good strategies, lessons learned, and whatnot, to identify, support, and empower these male champions, and work along with them. So it's just a very broad question. Any reflections, suggestions, ideas you have? And thanks a lot for the very interesting panel discussion.
Thank you. Julia, yes, go ahead.
Jacqueline, did you want to say something? Or
No.
I go in? Okay.
Julia can go ahead, and then Jacqueline. Yeah.
Sure, I'm happy to briefly address this, and also happy to continue offline the conversation. I'm really glad that you raised this aspect, Felix, because it's definitely something that's been on the radar for a long time. Talking about, I mean, if men are often like 90% of the time the ones who are perpetuating violence against women, how do we bring them on board as allies and also as beneficiaries of feminist policies? Because often policies around gender transformation and feminism, care policies, are gonna exponentially support men as well, whether it's in terms of having more opportunities to engage with their feelings and being human, or in terms of childcare opportunities, or a whole range of benefits. I think in terms of local and regional governments and what they're doing, there are definitely programs around the world that local governments are already implementing to either bring men in terms of violence against women, or to support men's mental health. For instance, in the city of Bogota, they have a program which works with men and care, around the concept of care. So teaching men about childcare and housework and things like this. And they also have it's called a care line, and it's like a phone call that men can make to speak about their emotions on that, as opposed to like expressing their anger elsewhere. I think one of the challenges that local governments face, though, is in terms of, for instance, funding. So often funders or national governments don't want to give funding to gender equality programs if they involve money going to men. So that's like a big barrier, obviously, and or requires like more creative ways to addressing the issue. But definitely, just using the example of our previous steering committee meeting of our Committee on Gender Equality with our leaders, there was quite a strong interest of having this conversation of how we bring more men into the conversation about being allies and supporting feminist municipalism.
Yeah. All right. Thank you. Anil, your hand is up. Or before Anil, maybe Jacqueline? Yeah.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Jacqueline. I just want to provoke the audience a bit. And this is just me with the participants. With regards to getting the message across, I think we should start, let's say, at home. At home, the toys we buy as parents. How many of us around the meeting today who are parents have gone to the shop and they've got this perfect little doll, the Barbie, for their daughter, and they've got the car for their little boy? Now, why that? I've always believed that the boy can also, I know some people will think I'm just going crazy, but I'm not. I don't think I am. I wish I'm not. And why not have the boy with the doll and the girl with the car as well? Because it's I saw somebody one day, he said, I don't want to be a princess when I grow up. I want to be a CEO, which was brilliant, because for the girl as well, why can't I be driving a car? Why is it only the little boy who will be driving a car? How many of us as parents, we've called our daughter and we said, come and make your bed, but then we're okay with the boy not making the bed. So these are the gender approach with regards to duties as parents. And then from there, we move on to the school, and it goes on and on. But Jacqueline, I don't want to put you in a tight spot, having to ask me to shorten my contributions. I'll go over it quickly. At school as well, mixed school as opposed to school for boys and school for girls. What happens to that? Have we done a complete study? Maybe it's time to do it. Why do we have to segregate boys and girls when they are young? Why don't we just promote schools, mixed schools through and through? And then the other thing would be to start sensitizing at a very young age of the values of both men and women, as opposed to this is a girl and this is a boy. And the third one, which I think finally, if we can start working on this, finally the end result will be to see women and men, one complements the other. We are not adversaries, adversaires, c'est quoi en anglais? We're not fighting each other. We are complementing each other. And there shouldn't be the fight. And we should not be seeing it as a fight. And this is why I hesitate to say the struggle. It's not a struggle for gender equality. It is the promotion of the values for equity. So that's a little bit of what I wanted to share. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you. Anil, please go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. I liked what Jacqueline said. But, I come from in a place where before even a child is born, you determine the color. You say pink and blue. Blue for boy child and pink for girl child. And I mean, just imagine, I mean, that is the conditioning we are talking about. And I don't know, why it is. And on terms of the question on boys only, girls only school, I would basically say we need to write a petition to the, Pope in Rome, because most of the Jesuit institution in the world, it is the only institution which has boys only and girls only institutions. We need to basically start from there, because no other institutions, because my boy, in Tokyo, is being compelled to go into a Jesuit, institution which is 100 years old, and he hates it because he has been growing up in a mixed co-ed environment, and all of a sudden he had put into a boys only regimentized, institution. Of course not, So I think that is a habit. But the point I wanted to, raise was with Flakes. I think there is a word of caution, when we say to identify men champions. I'll give you an example. There is this particular, municipality in Nepal, where the mayor comes from a Dalit, he's a Dalit leader himself. So when I asked the Dalit women leader, do you consult the mayor? Of course, they say he's from our own community. We go, he gives all these access and everything. And then I asked these women, how many times have you presented the case in the council? They said 0. Why? Because the mayor represents us. So the issue what I'm trying to bring here is that in the name of empowerment, of course, the mayor may be raising the issue raised by these Dalit women, but that is not real empowerment and inclusion. Unless and until the mayor give the opportunity to that very women representative to be able to speak in the council, no matter what, he may be belonging to the same community, he may be belonging to the same ethnic background, but that is not real empowerment. So this is where we need to be very careful. When we are basically identifying champions, we also need to see the nuances, whether the action that these leaders are promoting, are they empowering, or are they making these women leaders dependent? So to me, I think we need to be little more, deep in terms of trying to understand these, strategies and these cliches. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Anil. Thank you so much for that. I don't know if Jennifer, you are around, and picking up from where Anil has stopped. There's a lot of talk, there's a lot of policy, there are a lot of documents being prepared. How do we really move from policy and talk to action? How do we unlock that? Jennifer, if you're here.
Yes, I am, Jacqueline. So in terms of moving from policy to action, I will echo what Anil says and what everyone else has said. It is important for local action. And at the ULEC Foundation, that is why we are really focused on shifting funding to organizations headquartered in the Global South. And at present, our focus is really on East and West Africa. And because we recognize that beyond supporting thinking, beyond scholarship, it's very important to engage with local policy makers. And like Felix said, if no matter what is done without engaging policymakers who are often male, those ideas would have very minimal traction. So that is what I would recommend. And finally, I would also want to highlight the potential of movements, particularly feminist movements, around these issues that are coming together to advocate and to garner public attention on this issue in a way that can push public opinion and public pressure on policymakers to adopt these thinking and engage with the scholarship and development practitioners.
Yeah, we need to stop working in silos of government and civil society and feminist organizations. Yeah, thank you so much. Paddy has a question. Please unmute yourself. Paddy, you can go ahead.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Afternoon, everyone. Glad to be here. My name is Paddy Sianga Knudsen, a Zambian by nationality, working in the space of public finance management, and very much interested in the gender responsive side of things. And really, it's been very enlightening to hear from the various speakers. And then I wanted to sort of bring in this evaluation perspective and angle. We often talk about implementation, and I think we lose sight of how the very last part of that project cycle, right, where we look at how evaluation, and particularly around gender audits, we see words being thrown around climate financing. That's in relation to how gender responsive budgeting is going to go forward, how gender responsive approaches are going to be adapted. So I just wanted to find out from some of the speakers what you sort of see as the role of, I mean, many terminologies are used in this space: gender responsive evaluation, gender audits. To what extent do you see these being very useful in your spaces? And I think even in the space of talking about the role that parliaments have to play in terms of oversight to ensure that all the implementation part is really matching with the programs and plans that are being made. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Who wants to take that one? Julia? Yeah.
Jacqueline raised her hand.
Oh, okay, Jacqueline. Sorry, I could not see your face. Jacqueline, go ahead.
No, Julia, if you want to go ahead. All right. So my answer to this would be on our side, because we work with mayors and we work with politicians. So that already makes it slightly easier than if you were only from the NGOs. Because when you are mayors, you are already politicians, so you already have the ears of the members of parliament. And for what we have on the charter, let's say our charter for gender equality in Africa, let's call it our wish list. So if the mayors can implement our wish list, and the mayors sell the ideas, and because the mayors, once they sell the ideas and the population buys the idea, they're on board with it, then they would push for it to be, because it means it's a vote for them. Remember, mayors want to be re-elected, and members of parliament want to stay into politics as well. So I'll just take a silly example. If they know that all women like wearing green dresses, so they would push green dresses, and finally green dresses will get to the parliament, members of parliament, and it will get into a vote. So it's a joint effort. It's a joint effort where it can be a win-win. I know in some places it will be very difficult. Mr. Anil, I can sort of feel what it's like, but we should not lose hope. It has to start somewhere. You mentioned about the religious group and etc., Jesuit, but this is just one single group. It's not the whole world. If we look at the position of women in the whole world, we way back from the universal suffrage. And years back, we've moved. And in some countries, if you would allow me to give an example in my country, I always joke and I say, oh my goodness, in my country, probably now we have to be starting taking care of the rights of men. That's to say, because we have moved along. It was not built like that. We've had to make it happen, and we start somewhere. And I always believe that if we start with the children, if we try and introduce gender sensitivity when we are at school, then the children, they are they bear the lights of tomorrow. So, it may not be within our time and 5-10 years time, but we might be inactive then, but it will be the new ones growing up. So they won't have had to face the same conversation that we are facing today. They will be probably fighting for water and air fresh air to breathe. So that's a bit of the contribution that I would like. It's good if you have politicians, because the politicians are the one that brings the change, and the people are the one who pushes the politician to make the change.
Great. Before Anil, you come on board, I want to add one question to you as well. Anil, you can combine the answers. One question from Purity Ashkoy. She is asking, how can women participate in gender responsive budgeting and processes? I think the planning and the budgeting processes are done by government. Maybe you can combine your response together with that. Anil?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Jacqueline. No, please, no, I didn't intend to, it was a misquote, maybe you misunderstood. I mean, as a part, I did not want to bring any religious sect as such, but that came as an example to me because, it was very much there, as my boy is suffering. So I got that. But always, please don't misunderstand. There is nothing, I mean, whether it is nothing to do with any particular religion, but, as such, that was the intent. But let me come to this whole issue of how in terms of whether the policies of gender audit or all those which are there, how it can be implemented. I think over the years, what I have realized is that end of the day, we need to clearly understand the political economy behind any decision-making process, be it gender, be it non-gender, whatever it may be, right? If we understand the political, economy behind it, then I think any strategy would work, For a matter of example, I'll give you an example of many years ago, there was this particular state from which I come from in India, and it was election time. There was a particular policy which was pushed by the women's self-help group to the state government. And the government was blocking that for a very long time. There was this very interesting, very progressive secretary who was a male again, who decided that, okay, the only way that I can do to get the attention of the politicians is to get to, convince the chief minister. So there was a whole women gathering of around 500,000 women. So he asked the chief minister, please come. So of course it was election time. The chief minister was very happy. He came, he gave all his speech. Towards the end of it, the chief minister, as usual, asked, you have anything that you want me to do, once I get re-elected. So this women leader from this association took up this file and went to the chief minister and said, we want you to commit on this policy. Now imagine, he is now confronted with so many votes and the election time. So there was no way that he could say no. And the policy got endorsed by the chief minister then and there. So you need to be innovative, you need to be strategic, and you need to understand the political economy of how to drive such of these policies. I think that is the way, in terms of how we go about it. In terms of the gender budgeting, Nepal is a country, I mean, not only Nepal, I think in South Asia, many countries, UN Women has been promoting, gender inclusive budgeting process. And basically at a policy level, I've seen that many of these governments with the Ministry of Finance and the National Planning Commissions, having specific indicators in terms of tracking, the gender budgeting aspect of it. But I think end of the day, as I said, I mean, everything boils down to the, political decision making and the economy behind it. So any of those policies can actually be able to see for the politician's point of view that can be translated into future votes. I think those will get endorsed. So how innovatively we will be able to bring that aspect, in our strategy, I think that is the key. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Anil. I think that was a really wonderful presentation, conclusion to it. Let us innovate, let us be strategic, let us understand our context, let us be transformational. Thank you so much to all our guest speakers today. I think it has been quite an enriching conversation, dialogue, and we really look forward to seeing you again also in future working group meetings. Thank you so much for your feedback. Thank you so much for the questions to all the participants. We only have just one more thing to do, 1 minute, 5 more minutes of your time. Please confirm to us whether this goes out to all the members in the group, all the participants today. If these are the topics that you would like us to to focus on in the next 1 year as a working group? Are these topics okay? Are we comfortable with them? Is there something that you feel that is missing, that is important, that should be captured? Is there something that you think should be removed as well? You can raise your hand. I hope I will be able to see it. Yes, I see thumbs up. I see thumbs up. Any reservations on the topics? On the focus areas as a working group? Feel free to post your comments on in the chat, please. And then finally, before we close for today, we wanted to inform you of all our upcoming activities. We will be having quarterly working group activities, working group meetings. We would want to try and develop a white paper by the end of the year that brings together all this information and the discussion and elevates this conversation of women empowerment through in local government. And we would really like to see if we can get participants or members from LPSA to contribute to this working paper, to this white paper. So please get in touch with us. We will explore topics of mutual interest. We have already identified some of the topics that we are interested in, and thank you for your feedback. We want to continue knowledge sharing. We want to continue sharing experiences, research paper, information. Please get in touch with us. As we said in the beginning, we are looking for co-chairs to help us in leading the working group forward. So please, if you're interested in becoming a co-chair, please write us an email at women@decentralization.net if you would like to become a co-chair, or if you don't want to be a co-chair, you can also be a co-working group member. This is a team that really works together to develop content and plan for events and contribute to the discussions that we are having. If you would also like to be a contributor, please write to the white paper. Please write to us at women@decentralization.net. Secondly, we would really invite you to register as an LPSA member and join the Women's Empowerment Gender Equality Working Group. You can see on the side, please make sure to check the Women's Empowerment. This will enable you to get updates and information about upcoming meetings, upcoming activities and events. You can register at www.decentralization.net. And then finally, we will keep the Mentimeter on for the next 7 days. So please note this code down, www.mentimeter.com. The code is 14673721. It is also, the link is also in the chat. We would really like to hear your thoughts on what we should prioritize. Maybe you have other ideas, different topics you would want us to focus on. We would really appreciate your feedback on that. And then finally, we invite you for the next working group meeting, which shall be held same time, February 28th, the 28th of February, 2024. We really hope that you will come back, and we really hope that you will email us if you have a presentation, a case study, an example of local government initiatives to empower women and towards gender equality. So I want to say thank you again to our distinguished speakers. I think it has been quite an informative and interesting conversation. It's an excellent way to start our working group, and we are very excited to see what comes out of these conversations as we move forward. Thank you for every person who was able to join and stay with us, and we apologize that it took a little bit longer than we had anticipated, but you have really been a great support, and we really want to say thank you. So looking forward to seeing you in February 2024, same time online. Thank you so much. Bye-bye. I don't know. Jamie, are we good? Do you have something to tell us?
Nothing other than to say thank you. I enjoyed listening and learning. So thanks so much, and we see each other again soon. Thank you.
Thanks. Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.